Okay.
Absolutely. But there are tools that are, and this is, again, it's going to be regional information, because I do honestly believe a lot of what I hear from other researchers about their region. Now, I have people who contact me on a weekly basis that are from other regions, that we have mutual respect for each other as field researchers, and they're talking about finding, certain types of stone that are used for cutting. But where we're at here in Florida, you really don't, especially in the areas that we're catching them on film and then we've been studying. You don't have the shale. You have shell rock. This is what we find is when they dig up Florida, in the Everglades and all that stuff, we find evidence of the cataclysm itself as well, and tsunamis and all kinds of stuff in the Everglades. The Everglades, they believe, was formed by a tsunami. So I mean, really, Florida, all it is just a giant sandbar. It's just a giant sandbar that's been exposed long enough to put a little tree growth on it. And that's pretty much what it is. And most of it in South Florida is below sea level, or was below sea level. The interior of the state, certainly. You have the Everglades. So, we're looking at a totally different ecosystem, a totally different arboreal ecosystem. And all of these things contribute to what they use. So, yes, they do use rudimentary tools, but it will be a broken stick.
Right.
And what you'll see is they'll knock a palm tree down, and they have these worms that bore into these palms. The woodpeckers will go after them. That's why the woodpecker holes, you'll find them all up these huge palm trees. But the Sasquatch, instead of climbing it, obviously, with its strength, it just knocks the tree down.
Right.
And then in the root ball itself is the softest part. The root ball, part of it is exposed above the ground, and the palm tree sits in it in a notch. When they push that palm tree down, I have found sticks inside that root ball where they'll move the tree out of the way. They'll go into the woodpecker holes as well with these sticks. I found sticks sticking out of the woodpecker holes in Myakka. But Christopher and I, on expedition in Myakka, when he had his encounter or his sighting, the second day, we were tracking the one that he saw back into this area, and it ended in a swamp. And we found a palm tree at the edge of the swamp where there were 30 or 40 tracks where you could see that this individual was milling around at the edge of the swamp and had knocked a palm tree down, broke a stick off, and was digging at the root ball. And you could see where it was prying and pulling, and parts of the stick were broken off inside of it. I mean, all of this is sign, if you learn how to read it, you can tell that it was something with an opposable thumb.
Right.
Obviously, it had big feet. They were barefoot. They were human. And why is he here in this swamp? I mean, at that time, Christopher had just had his sighting. I had been screamed at that point, but hadn't seen one yet. So my mind was still filled with skeptical explanations. And okay, well, there's a barefoot hillbilly back in here with giant feet, and that makes no sense, and why am I even thinking it, But yes, rudimentary tools, absolutely. I've also seen evidence that they will and have scavenged from human campsites.
Okay.
In the area that we research in, we found a basic shelter, and they use basic half-hitch knots. I didn't find anything that was above the ignorance of awareness of a half-hitch knot. But we have a very rough grass down here, and we call it gator grass. And you can literally make a rope out of 6 or 7 strands of this stuff. And they'll use that, and they'll tie up, they'll pull 2 saplings down, tie the tips together, saplings 15 to 20 feet away, pull them down, crisscross them, and tie them together with this gator grass. And then take the palm fronds from the cabbage palms or the saw palmettos, and lash these things to this structure to create a rudimentary, to this framework to create a rudimentary structure. In those structures, I have found twine from campsites, hemp twine. I have found twine that appears to be from a rope that they dismantled and pulled apart. Most rope is combined twine, as we know it, a natural type of rope, and they'll pull that apart, the strands, and they'll use that. I found that laying around. I found Folgers coffee cans laying inside these structures, and I'm talking about structures that stink. It has the Bigfoot stink to where if you sit inside of it, you pick it up on your pants.
Wow.
I mean, this place smells. And not only that, but at the time of us investigating the structure, we just so happened to catch them on film watching us investigate their structure. So this is not some, you know, I mean, I have that one video. It's called "Isolated." Is this a deformed Bigfoot? My brother and I had just finished investigating that structure when I caught that juvenile Bigfoot on film snarling at him. He and I, and we were just leaving the structure. It had been watching us, and so the mind I go to, well, was this thing involved in making this structure? You know what I mean? I mean, this is the structure itself blew my mind when I found it. And rudimentary tools, yes. Rudimentary skills, yes. I found what appeared to be a metal strip from a car, some type of I don't know if it was the leaf spring itself or what it was, but it appeared to be off of a vehicle, and there were several holes dug. And this is really interesting, man. This one here is really interesting. The day after I got hit with the branch, the first time we discovered him in this area, I went down off the levee in the dark. There was one of them on my left. We caught him on film, big gray one. Well, I think it was him. I think he was the one that hit me with the branch. I started to charge at the bushes because even at this point, I thought it was homeless people in the swamp. Homeless, right? I'm going, come out, come out. And you could hear them in there, but they wouldn't come out. So I started to charge the bushes. And about the third time I charged the bush, whack, I get hit with this branch. And it knocked me on my ass and knocked the camera out of my hand and gave me a bruise across my chest. And all this is on film. You can watch this happening as it unfolds. The next morning, we went back to the same spot, 5 a.m., less than 7 hours later, before the sun came up. And we were in there, and it's thick, man. We couldn't see anything. And Melanie was having a great bit of trouble, aside from the fact of, being terrified.
Right.
In the dark again. And we walked right up on him. And he growled at us in a way that sounded like he was irritated, like he was laying there and we were disrupting his sleep, is what it sounded like, or his hunting. But he was irritated, highly irritated, and we got that on film as well. It's in one of our episodes. But when the sun came up, I went back and charged in. And right there on the levee, I don't know whether they did this the night before when they hit me with the branch or after we left and went hiking back into the area that morning when we got growled at. But there was a huge hole in the side of the levee, and there was a piece of metal sticking out of it. And there were 3 large rocks stacked in a formation, sitting 3 feet away from the hole out on the side of the road. And they were not there the night before. Now, we were so shook up and it was dark that morning that I couldn't tell you whether the rocks were there then. That's why I say I can't confirm when they got there. But I can tell you that they weren't there 2 days earlier in the daytime because we were there. But I look at that and I was like, man, did this thing dig these rocks out with this metal tool and put them by the road as like a message, like I will smash your head?
Right.
Because that's the way I took it. And Melanie will tell you the same thing. I mean, when I talk about these things and I tell you these things, I will not bring up something that I can't back up with film evidence.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing too. You're down there, you're in the bush, you're doing field work, and you have all of this great film footage, these great still pictures, and that's what I keep saying is that Mark is not just doing research by proclamation, which is what goes on a lot. I mean, there is very good photographic evidence of these creatures, not just of their existence, but of their activity. Okay? And, that's why, and so I'm probably going to say it wrong, but how do they go up and look at some of the video, Mark?
You talking about the viewers, the listeners?
Yeah, the listeners, yeah.
Oh man, absolutely. You just go to Crypto Reality on YouTube and obviously subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll get notifications every time we put out a film. We typically put out 1 research film per week that's new from footage in the research area. If we don't get footage, I'll reach back into the archives, because when we had those occurrences in the beginning that I just went over, I pounded that area. Melanie and I were in that area for 2 months, 5 days a week shooting. And I have terabytes of film footage that I can reach back into that I haven't even looked at yet of when we were there. And people, I get contacted all the time. Well, how do you do this every week? You can't be catching these things on film every week. Well, we're not catching them on film every week. Last weekend, we were there for 6.5 hours to no avail. Right. And it doesn't happen. Every 7 to 10 expeditions, we find evidence or we catch them on film. But you have to understand, we're going in the exact area that they live in, and for some reason will not leave. I believe it's because they really have nowhere else to go. Right. They're hemmed in. They're separated. They're cut off. This is it. This is the last, bastion of free space in the county that they can occupy. They head to the west, and they've got Pratt Whitney. This is the J.W. Corbett Wildlife Management Area. There is a giant highway and fences that I built in the 90s to keep them in, regardless of what they tell us why we built those fences. I know that. You don't point barbed wire inside. These people, the bottom line is they have nowhere to go. So when we first started, I was like, we got them. We got to keep going. So, because, there's an old saying in fishing, I'm a fisherman. So there's an old saying, you don't leave fish to find fish. And I just applied that. Why would I, conduct research somewhere else when I know for sure? Right. So, they're here. So we stayed on it, and we shot hundreds of hours of footage over the course of 6 months in this area. And that's when we got the bulk of our information. Here now, and I think that was because really these things had never been realized by modern man here. They were in a state of shock that somebody, one of us, acknowledged that they were in there. They had been getting away with this for God knows how long. I can tell you this right now. I have footage of these guys with shock on their face. And you can see it come around the corner of a bush and go, whoa! And it's looking right at me, and I got this huge camera with a big shotgun mic pointed right at it. And that's the look you get. So Crypto Reality on YouTube, or Crypto Reality, the Bigfoot Researchers Journal on Facebook. Obviously, with Agenda Earth, we're going to take this into film at some point on expeditions, you and I.
Well, that's the thing, and we haven't even broached this subject with the listeners before, but we have had those conversations, folks. Mark and I, we've had conversations of, aside from the normal production of Agenda Earth, but additional projects that we can do and then bring it to you as an audience. And yeah, films, documentary type film projects are definitely on the table, and we're talking about that. We obviously will keep you informed as we develop the ideas, but we have a lot of exciting things we want to develop and bring to you guys. And Agenda Earth is kind of like the baseline presentation. So you have to stand by, stay tuned, and keep listening.
Absolutely. And while we're here and talking about my research, there's a few questions that I've wanted to present to you as an anthropologist, because I got to tell you, they run from me. The scientific community runs. They will not comment. And no one. Actually, that's not true. Last night, an anthropologist friended me and also asked to join the group. But that's the first one. Now, Melanie has been sharing our posts in several different, our movies in several different anthropology sites, but not yet, not a single comment. You can see that it's being watched.
I don't think you're going to get a lot of traffic there.
Well, my question to you is this. Okay. Is in reviewing our films, in reviewing our film evidence, when we say we're catching a Bigfoot on film, what do you recognize on film in the Bigfoot Researchers Journal? What is it that you recognize when I say, "Hey, you're staring at a Bigfoot right here"? What is it that you recognize as an anthropologist in our films?
Well, what I look at is what I call, and I have to admit I make up a lot of these terms as I go because they work for me.
Okay.
But I look at the primate disposition or the hominoid disposition. I look at the physiognomy. I look at I look for signs of, for example, you and I have talked about sagittal crests.
Mm-hmm.
I look at kinesiology. I look at the way that the creatures are predisposed in the bush.
Mm-hmm.
And the crouching, the posturing, the sitting, the leaning, and so all of these different kind of subtle criteria tell me that it's a creature, and it's not just a creature; it's a primate. It's not just a primate; it's a hominoid. It's a uncatalogued hominoid. But having said all of that, I'm also predisposed to think that this creature is real. And more than that, I don't have the added professional pressure. I don't have any of the institutionalized pressure when I look at this material. So I don't have to meter or measure or mitigate my observation.
Sounds like you're a free man.
It's scary, isn't it? It's a nightmare. Yeah.
I think that all over America, anthropological hearts are cracking wide open right now because the sudden realization that metered judgment and metered commenting on this particular subject is status quo for them is definitely occurring.
Yeah, because they have to see this coming Monday. I'm not going into anybody's office that I have to give account to.
You don't have to answer for it.
Right. So I can tell you something today, and on Monday, it'll be the same thing. But the other guy, even if he's watching or listening, or maybe he wants to, kind of, skulk around the website, he's got to be very careful. He's got to be very careful about how he responds, if he responds at all.
Oh, publicly? Oh my goodness, I doubt that. An email. I've gotten several emails, many emails, but not.
I'd like to. I can imagine what they say.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Confidentially, off the record, I'd like to say I agree with you, but
Yeah. Or, and it's funny because you'd be surprised how many academics ask questions. I was very surprised about that.
Well, now there are some who just, by time and circumstance, this is just so off their radar because it's healthier that way.
Mm.
It's so off their radar, and they haven't, they haven't looked at it. They haven't read the literature, the body of work on this, because to them it is like looking for leprechauns,
or looking for early retirement.
Looking for early retirement, for sure. And so, a lot of them really earnestly don't know. Hey, what are you finding? What's going on with this?
Well, that's obvious. Yeah.
You answer the question, they kind of file it away. But listen, I'm to the point now. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're not going to get. You are not going to get that side of the fence on your side of the fence until the stink of this is washed off.
Or, and I believe this to be true, they have a ton of backup.
Well, the backup is laying on a slab, and of course that gets people fired up too.
Well. Here's the thing, though, too, and this is my firm belief: without the slab, without the cadaver, there is. I look at it without the slab. The only way, and this is just my opinion, the only way that it can get done is the exact way that any political issue, and I believe this is in part a political issue, is with public unity and organization. The same way legislation is enacted in Washington, D.C., this has to be approached in number, seriously, with the general public support. And I mean a lot.
I would love for this to be strictly a scientific issue. I would love for it to be a historical issue minus the crass subjectivity. But given the nature of American society, the reality is we politicize things that aren't political.
Mm.
We politicize sports. We politicize music. We politicize science. We politicize everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And the reason we do that is because by politicizing something, you grant yourself the luxury of saying whether it's true or not. That's why we do it. We politicize things that aren't political because it gives us the luxury of constantly reshaping our reality. So politicians argue over global warming and other scientific issues. And I promise you, none of them know what they're talking about. I promise you. They're just grandstanding. They're doing everything except stripping.
That's so true.
Right? So, but that's just the nature of our society. But yes, this is political.
Oh man,
This is.
I don't think there's any way around it. And either way, even if somehow it wasn't, eventually it will be.
It would be.
Yeah.
It would be.
Yeah. There's no way around that. You take something like this, and here's the thing, though. I mean, if it wasn't political, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Because science would have been all over it. I mean, it's either the politics of science or the politics of government. There's only two possibilities where this subject is concerned. The bottom line is corporations fall under the umbrella of government politics.
I mean, we have a show. We have a show because everything is politicized.
Yeah, man.
That's why we have the show. Now, are you familiar with the Brookings Report?
I am actually, yes.
Okay, okay.
And that automatically verifies everything you just said.
Every scintilla. So, I always like to, in case there's a listener out there who's saying, oh, these guys are going nuts. No. In the late 50s, ladies and gentlemen, when NASA was established, they commissioned the Brookings Institute to do a study on the impact and effect on American society of the confirmation of extraterrestrial life. Brookings report said, based on the last 500 years of human history, when a more technologically sophisticated society comes into contact with a less technologically sophisticated society, the less technologically sophisticated society is irreparably damaged.
Well, there it is in a nutshell.
But that's based on a sample of one, which is bad research. That's based on human civilization. It's based on the example of European contact with non-European peoples, specifically Asia, North America, and Africa. At the time that European exploration was initiated, the Aztecs, the Cherokee, the Maya, the Zulu, the Mabutu, they had neither horses nor guns. If I have horses and guns,
You're done.
you don't,
You're done.
I win.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there it is.
So anyway, so Brookings says this. So NASA takes these findings, and their philosophy becomes, okay, if we find it, we've got to hide it because they can't handle it.
That's in black and white.
Right. So that was 1959. Okay? That was in 1959. Gas was $0.25 a gallon. And what's crazy is that's the status quo. All of this stuff, guys, all of this stuff we've been talking about, this filtration system, we've been talking about giants, we've been talking about suppressed information, we've been talking about suppressed history, suppressed archaeology, da 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 da. All of this goes back to Brookings. So don't think that the Brookings report, the Brookings findings, is just specific to aliens.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you have any idea when the National Security Act was passed?
1947.
Okay, so then you have the legislation in 47 that makes the Brookings report okay.
Well, here
The behavior. I'm saying you cannot justify that behavior without a law first. That's how the country works. There you have the law. There you have the law. Now you have the official policy.
But here's the little beautiful anecdote to what I just said. Several things happened in 1947.
Oh yeah.
Number one, a very curious set of events unfolded on a ranch just outside of a small town in New Mexico called Roswell. Immediately after that, another amazing event. Immediately following that, the Air Force became a separate branch from the Army. Prior to that, it was called the Army Air Force. But immediately following that incident, the Air Force became a separate military branch.
It became compartmentalized.
Exactly. Immediately following that, you had, just as you said, the establishment of the National Security Act, 1947. Immediately following that, still, we're in 1947, you had the development of the Central Intelligence Agency, formerly known as
the OSS. The OSS, baby.
So,
which I don't know if are you aware that was actually British, the OSS, its inception.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We took it, evolved it. But so, ladies and gentlemen, you see how what Brookings came back and did 2 decades after the establishment of the National Security Act, or a decade and some years.
A decade, yeah.
A decade. When they came back with that report to NASA during the Eisenhower administration, by the way, they already had perfect legal cover. The National Security Act. We've already got cover. Listen, Brookings told us we have to hide this. And it just so happens we have legal cover to do it.
Yeah, and isn't that indicative of every single gradual change that we've seen in this country since the inception of the Federal Reserve? I mean, to take it all the way back to that, man. It all, and that's the thing, when you really start looking into all of this stuff, you're always going to see a legal precedent that precedes that legal precedent before any type of a shift,
major shift, yeah.
in any kind of implementation. You're going to see the groundwork, and it will be something in that groundwork, in that legislation, that you can identify that will tell you what change will be occurring gradually over the next decade or two. You can see that in the legislation. It's in the bill. It was in the Patriot Act in 2000 when they passed Patriot Act.
See, the Patriot Act was just kind of an adjunct to the National Security Act.
Yeah, actually, yes. But, you can see it. They're saying in that bill, we are expanding our power in this country for monitoring,
right,
and basically spying at home. You can see it. Now, I hate to get off the subject, but the bottom line is
but no, it's not off subject. It's total. It's right. It's bull.
Yeah, because Bigfoot falls under this umbrella, the umbrella of all of this,
Yeah. I mean, it's this whole line of inquest.
I look at that National Security Act, and if you take it for what it is at its basis level, it's the legalization of need to know. It's the legalization of it's like, I mean, it is so offensive. It's so offensive to me. It burns in my gut to this very second.
It was because, like I said, it came so swiftly on the heels of Roswell. Of course, that was instrumental in the development of this.
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean, instrumental. I think that's an understatement.
It was a direct corollary.
Yeah, I think so, man. I don't think you could put a UFO, bro.
They didn't know what else to do.
Yeah,
those days, they didn't know what else to do. We've got to throw a big net over this thing because here's something that maybe some of the listeners don't know. A press release went out of the Roswell base. The first press release that they put out said, Army Air Force recovers crash disk. Later on, they redacted that press release and changed it. Army Air Force recovers radar reflector. So, what happened? The real story got out first. See, the first story they put out, that was the real story. But that was before they knew what the implications were.
Well, you know what happened? I don't know the inside story. I don't know that anyone ever will. But based on, I'm sure that H.G. Wells and Orson Welles triggered some psychological studies in the United States when that went off, because I understand that to be a significant event in the study of American consciousness.
That very famous broadcast that you're referring to, of course, the book by H.G. Wells.
H.G. Wells
was performed on radio on Halloween night, 1938, by
Orson Welles. Yeah.
Now imagine, it's Halloween night. Okay, so folks are already kind of edgy, right? And you broadcast, and in 1938, of course, radio was the primary component of home entertainment. So everybody was listening. Kids were trick-or-treating, people having parties, folks sitting in their living room listening to the radio. So it was absolutely a perfect case study. So in 1947, in post-war America, it even makes a little sense when you look at how they responded. But I think it got away from them. It got out ahead of them. I think they just went overboard, like most things.
Uh-huh.
It becomes institutionalized. It becomes compartmentalized. It becomes a culture of suppression, a culture of misdirection, a culture of secrecy.
Well, once you have a black file, it's very simple to justify stuff in anything that may, M-A-Y, may have some potential of disruption.
And then they
right into it, you know?
This old philosophy, because 1947 is the beginning of the Cold War. And after all, you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. So you don't tell anybody. So, but I brought all that up to say that this is nothing more than an extension of that, of Roswell, of the National Security Act, of all of those things. It's just of Brookings. This is nothing other than an extension of that, of the idea of pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. There's nothing to see here. Everybody move along. Avoid the anomaly, which is how I put it on an earlier show. Avoid the anomaly. And this is gonna. I can see right now this will be a key component to this show.
Oh man.
I'll just tell the listeners straight up. We've spent this program really doing a lot of Bigfoot talk, but we're going to detour on a future show back to the giant conversation because I've after discussing things with Mark, I pulled even more notes. We've been talking about the Ninth Legion, disappearance of the night. I pulled some notes, and we'll talk about on some future show. And I mean, like, immediately in the future.
Yeah.
About the Roman occupation of Britain, about the conflict there with some of the tribes and clans, about the reality of giants that occupy Great Britain and the potential connection to the disappearance of the Ninth Legion. I just want to kind of tease the listeners, but I will have some information on that in an upcoming show.
That's great.
To talk, I absolutely when we worked on the other show the other day, I couldn't help myself. I immediately started pulling down some notes, digging around, scratching around.
Isn't it just an incredible part of history?
It's ridiculous.
That's one of my favorite pieces of history of all time tonight.
It is absolutely incredible. And what's really fun about it is that there are real life historical figures right in the middle of this thing.
That's so good.
We're not talking about Peter Pan and Snow White here. I mean, there are actual flesh and blood, real verifiable historical figures all the way mixed up in this thing.
Yeah, man, this is going to be a good one. And not only that, but we have that gigantic piece of physical evidence called Hadrian's Wall.
That's right. And I assure you that will be a significant focal point of my commentary when we get back into this. But listen, and I don't mind telling the audience. Mark had the idea today, really, to have a little Bigfoot dialogue, and we both agreed and make a great show. Make a great show. It's a little bit divergent, though not really, from what we've been talking about on the last couple of shows. I mean, it really does dovetail into it.
It does.
Okay. But he thought it would be a good idea. I said, I think it's a great idea. And
well, man, I've been really wanting to. We haven't had a lot of time to talk about what you've seen in our films together. You know what I mean? I wanted to get your opinion about that kind of stuff. You know what I
Well,
mean?
way back when I had you on Shadowland, and listen, and then you know me. Look, if I thought it was hogwash, I'd say, look, Mark, I don't know what this is, but you got a lot of nice pictures of,
Bush.
yeah, exactly, various fauna, the flora.
Thank you for the pareidolia experience.
Yeah, it's been a great travel brochure. Whenever I get the urge to visit Mayakas River State Park, you're the guy. You're top on the list.
Welcome to lush South Florida.
But no, I mean it's. I mean, if I thought that there was nothing there, I'd say, "Hey, Mark, there's nothing there," but that's not the case. I would love to have said, "Oh, Mark, this is just nonsense." You know how you get the ghost pictures, and there's no ghost there.
Oh yeah.
You've seen those, and you guys, if you're listening to this show, you know that you have been on the internet looking at ghost pictures. You know you have. And you know that a lot of it is just there's nothing there. You see furniture. You see like real people, like actual people, right? And you see whatever, but you know there's no ghost in that picture. So you know what I'm talking about.
And it's funny because it is the same thing. I believe that ghosts exist.
I do too.
I've never.
They don't exist in a lot of these pictures.
That's right. It's the same thing with the Bigfoot species. I know because I'm an eyewitness, but I also know that I've seen many pictures that they're not in, and I also know for a fact that when we review our films, we make damn sure that you're going to be able to see. You're going to be able to see more than trees, and not only that, but that there's some movement, there's some activity, there's something. This is a real being that we're all viewing. We have a high standard about that, and I think that's one of the reasons why we get the reaction we do from the general public.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, there's nothing worse than than pictures of things that aren't there.
I don't have time for that. I know I have more respect for people than to present something like that. That's why I do have a tendency to view those comments, those few comments, because we really at this point don't even entertain them.
Right.
But those few comments, when I review them, I know for a fact that they're so off base. I'm seeing someone who is flat out not looking.
Yeah. Well, of course. Well, now the reality of this is the following: if you got a Bigfoot to pose, just say you got a Bigfoot to just pose for a picture.
Something's not stirring the Kool-Aid.
And you were able to, there would be people who said they didn't see you. That's my point. I mean, if you got a Bigfoot to just be still and pose about 10 feet from your camera, like on a beef jerky commercial, there would still be people who got online and said, I don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, or what I get is the squint, and then the head starts to cock.
Or my favorite, this is my favorite. This is, if you want, and I know this is going to sound bad. You want somebody to really show you how dumb they are? Well, it's just like looking at cloud formations.
Yeah.
You can see anything you want to see.
Yeah, I get that one too.
How about that, right?
Uh-huh.
And
it is truly a disappointment to all of mankind that consciousness actually exists.
It makes you question. I mean, you wonder, where do we fit in the Darwinian tree if some of us are that dumb?
And you know what the bottom line is here's the thing. Here's the thing. I honestly think that it comes down to a question of core belief with every single individual. I mean, I've said this in some of our videos. We all know individual consciousness is determined by awareness. That's it, period. This comes down to straight, I have either experienced something or not. Like I always say the same exact thing. When I was born, I was ignorant to the fact that at some point in my life, I'd be able to hit a light switch and the lights would come on. Right. But that does not mean that electricity did not exist when I was born. You know what I mean? And so in governing responsibly my own self-awareness, which I believe is the responsibility of every single person on planet Earth, my own self-awareness. I mean, I'm responsible for that. It's my responsibility to participate in the human race with a level of awareness that enables me to contribute to the human race in a way that would be beneficial. Know what I mean? And I look at that and I view all that, those responses and that stuff as someone who has no desire for the truth. And that offends me more. Knowing that offends me more about these individuals than their actual comments. Because I know the truth of what's going on behind that little facade that they put on publicly to make themselves a little more comfortable. And the other aspect of it is, why are you here in the first place? Why are you reviewing my film in the first place? Because I see it as an issue of extreme uncomfortability with the subject itself.
Well, there is a
like it's like I just for a second. It's like I go to the doctor with a hammer in my hand and a gaping wound in my own skull, blood pouring down my face, and I'm covered in it. I have actually begun to turn pale white. My socks are soaked with my own blood. It's run down my back. My shirt is soaked with it. And I have the audacity to ask the doctor, what's wrong with me?
What's wrong?
And then he says, well, you have a hammer in your hand, and sir, you just hit yourself in the head with it. Right. And I say, well, how do I get around that? Don't do that again.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. And you know something? These people will repeatedly come back, make themselves uncomfortable again, and make the same stupid comment.
Well,
it's paranoia.
I realized today, well, not just today, but, when you have a project, an organization, like what, you have established, what I have established, what we have established together, listen, there are self-appointed policemen. There are self-appointed policemen who are going to run every word under the electron microscope to see where they can play gotcha. I've seen it my entire professional life. If you say that you turned left on Smith Street, they'll say, actually, I checked it on Google Maps, you turned right.
But, at the core, isn't that like a self-objection? I mean, the bottom line is it's a lot easier to look at someone else's work,
right,
and have an opinion about it, as opposed to do it yourself. And step out of that shadow you exist in. You know what I mean? That uncomfortable self-cast shadow. Right.
Yeah, I mean, but it's the kind of thing that you're subject to when you go out the way we've gone out. We've gone out, way public, putting this information out. But it's just part of it. I mean,
yeah, I don't see there ever being a way around that. And the funny thing is there will never be a shortage of people who are new to the subject and uncomfortable on the subject. So it will never end. That's the reality we find ourselves in as purveyors of what has been deemed alternative information, when I think, in fact, it's the exact opposite. This is the real information. What you've been presented is the alternative. You just bought it. Hook, line, and sinker, pal. You're pulling 17 pounds of drag on a Linger Pitman. If you're a fisherman, you know what that means. You're pulling drag, baby, on alternative information that's provided to you through typical programming. Chew on that one for a while.
Yeah. I mean, it's so listen. I have a friend of mine is a professor of philosophy at a university in town here, and of course he's had the good sense to not be quote controversial, so he is a tenured professor.
That's right.
So we talk. I couldn't pass that.
I don't care what anybody says. You are a good man.
But we talk all the time about this kind of craziness. And he said to me that he got to the point where, assigning research papers, things like that. He got to the point where he said, one of your references cannot be Wikipedia.
Oh my God!
Now, how bad is it, right? Now, how bad is it when he's got to say it? One of your references cannot be Wikipedia. This is modern day American university academia culture.
Oh, they see that repetitive in those papers too.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, but that's just where we are now.
Well, something, I got news for you, man. There's a very big difference. If you're listening and you are wondering about the Bigfoot subject and you're curious as to how it is that this has escaped your attention, all you have to do is continue to tune in to Agenda Earth, because we are going to lay it out for you week by week. The agenda, see, we'll talk about subjects, but you're not going to hear the information that we're talking about in this particular format, the way it's going to be laid out, because there is so much going on behind the scenes, contributing to you looking at the information that you see, the way it's viewed, how it's disseminated for you. There's so much going on behind the scenes with regards to that when you look at the information in its pure form, it's completely different. And that's the stuff that we're going to be covering here on Agenda Earth. It's the how, it's the why. Yes, we're going to talk about the giants. Yes, we're going to talk about the UFOs. Yes, we're going to do the ghosts. Yes, the demonology, all of these different subjects.
Oh, yeah.
The myriad of things that are obviously or have obviously been deemed controversial. But why? It's the why. Why is this controversial? Who said that there's something wrong with this truth of humanity's existence, of humanity's history? So that's really what Dr. Lester and I are after. And trying to bring you those aspects of it. You know what I mean?
There's a television show, and I love doing these little anecdotes because people go, what is he talking about now? In the early 70s, there was a primetime mystery drama called The Night Stalker.
That's great, man. Horseshack.
That's right. Called Kolchak.
Kolchak. That's right. Yeah, Kolchak.
It was based on a series of stories called the Kolchak Papers. But the point is, this Carl Kolchak was a news reporter, and he constantly would end up following stories in which he would have paranormal or supernatural encounters with something. Now, so that, of course, that made it fun. But the point I'm making is in every case, he was opposed by some agency of officialdom that wanted to suppress the information and desperately wanted him to not write about it, not talk about it. There were instances on the show where he was threatened with prosecution if he spoke about this.
And his editor was constantly on him, too.
His editor was complicit because the editor, being an editor, was entangled with those agents of officialdom, governmental bodies, law enforcement agencies, military organizations, etc. But you had this one guy, this one intrepid reporter who knew the truth. Now, they all knew the truth, but he was the only one who was willing to sit behind his typewriter and bang it out. Yeah.
And the other interesting aspect of that whole thing was the editor would not fire him because he got such a response in all of his stuff. So on one hand, he didn't want him to do it.
Yeah, he was never fired. If you guys have never seen the show, you got to check it out on Netflix or wherever you see it. But in every episode, he and his editor are yelling at each other at the top of their lungs.
Yeah, man, that's a great show.
But it speaks perfectly to what we're talking about. It's not a monster show. It's a show about a guy who is looking for the truth, and he's looking at the fundamental structure of reality, which is my mantra now. And that puts him at odds with officialdom.
If that doesn't say it all, I think we should end on that. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea.
I don't know that there's anything left to say about that.
No.
I think that pretty much shuts it up.
Oh, no. I mean, we beat it to death.
That's what I would call a nutshell.
Exactly.
Yeah, man.
So, ladies and gentlemen, listen. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure bringing this information, this dialogue to you. And I want to tell you, I am Dr. William Lester, and my co-host is none other than
Mark Zasky.
This has been Agenda Earth, and we will see you next time around.